and see the differences in the results that you get. It's a form of brainwashing that's going on.
Right.
And it is absolutely scary. And they are controlling, the groups behind all of this are actually controlling. The big joke, right? Russia was Russia was going to influence the election. Facebook has twice as much influence as Russia does. They know where these things are coming in. They know the messaging that they're putting out. They'll put out what they want, right? That's the bigger risk. You're going to talk about risk, bring it back to the shell, risk. That's the bigger risk, right, is what these kids are being fed.
That's a good point. Take a break here for our first segment. I'll just remind everyone you are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and Sal Freri. We ask you to download and subscribe to the show and rate us on iTunes on your favorite podcast platform. Also follow us on our social media pages like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So segment 2, let's talk about some of the logistical ramifications of this erosion of common sense. And after, Sal teed this up with the immense control and invasion of privacy and what have you that's going on here with the open arms endorsement of much of the millennial generation, because they think this is so easy, to communicate. But on the contrast is we have these tools going from my perspective in electronic security, and we've had a couple of guests on that have talked about the immense advancements in facial recognition, in analytics and what have you. So the integrator, of me says, these are great tools. We can generate data, and like you said, data can be used wrongly and it can be used correctly. But the concept of collecting that data, compiling that data, and building intelligence of these machine learning systems that can spot activities that are more suspicious than others, because the outcomes, teach the systems to look for that kind of activity. Yeah. And some are different based on different demographics, different settings, different countries that they're in, different cultures, different behavioral activities are normal, abnormal in other countries and what have you. So here's a great tool, as I see it, that can be put to use by systems integrators for their clients, for their customers. But there's hesitancy to use it because they're going to be accused of invading privacy. Mm-hmm. And yet in contrast, you see what's going on, on the social media side. So the integrator's like stuck. He's got these great new tools that are coming out that can be very effectively deployed. It is not up to them to decide how to use that information. That is for the end users, to determine, based on what they perceive their needs are. But to just eliminate or ban the use of some of these technologies, as has been done in certain municipalities, just seems to be a complete contradiction.
It's a contradiction, and again, where you would look at a particular problem and you have a solution. And we're talking about where you have really victimization, right? We all see these things in our worlds when we're doing the consulting projects. We see, you sit down and you talk to a client who has, a potential issue, right? And then every once in a while you get those where there's a real victim involved, and you really have to. It just gets to a whole different level, right? Where it's serious and it becomes life and death. And sometimes the things that we get involved in, get to that point. And you look at it and you go, so the common sense approach here is I have 7 different entrances that I got to worry about. And I may have an entry of somebody that's coming in, especially like in a workplace violence, somebody wants to come in, is going to shoot or whatever. And I got 7 different entrances. Do I put 7 guards on those entrances? Well, we've all seen guards at entrances of properties, right? And we've all seen the effectiveness of it, right? They wind up, in essence, getting distracted. To be polite, they get distracted, right? Otherwise, they're just not paying attention for whatever reason. And the opportunity for somebody to come in and do something against them is pretty high, right? It's not an effective barrier to stop. But now you got this technology where you can put a camera up and it's going to alert you that the person's coming in and set off an alarm and let you know. And you recognize the threat coming through the door. And you go, this is great. The common sense approach is I put up the cameras, I put this in. But now you wind up in a situation where, well, maybe I can't use the camera, or it's been outlawed, or we're not allowed to use it. And you sit there and you go, but the common sense approach to this is use the technology. And that's the most frustrating part out of this, is where you wind up with victims becoming victims because you're trying to satisfy a couple of people with incredibly radical views.
Well, compound that problem even further. Let's say you dodge that bullet and you are able to deploy the devices, right? And now you see that you have a true threat. And one of the common sense principles that we've always, being able to count on is that if you have, a guard service or what have you, you have electronic security, you've got surveillance, you've got data, you can present this information to the authorities, you have a problem, developing, you call in the authorities when you know that you got a problem. You never thought that the authorities wouldn't be there if you called them, or that they would show up and be told to stand down because of the, some other optics or agenda, that they're trying to satisfy. What does the CEO do now that he realizes that given of calling 911 and getting a prompt response isn't there? Is this opening up a whole new area of consideration where, entities really need to be considering their own armed law enforcement, just in case they have to be backing up or standing in place of the local authorities?
So I had an experience with the last set of riots, although I think to be politically correct, I'm supposed to be calling them mild disturbances. But so we had these riots in New York, and I get a phone call at around 11:30 one night from a guard at one of the buildings. And he says to me that the commercial establishment we attached to the building was being looted, and they broke through the glass. And they were running into the store. They were ripping. They were looting the store. And I said to him, did they get into the lobby on your side? He goes, no. He said, doors locked. I said, okay. I said, you're feeling relatively safe in that? He goes, so far. But if they come down, a couple of doors down, we're going to have a problem. So we go, you got a place that you can run in, you can hide, right? And I'm thinking about the idiocy of the conversation. Here I am trying to protect the security guard, the guy who's supposed to be there protecting the building. Now we're trying to keep him alive, trying to keep him out of harm's way. But the fun part, and it kind of goes to what you were just saying, I said to him, have you called 911, called 911? And his answer to me was, he kind of like stopped for a second and he went, why? I said, to call the cops. And he goes, they're here. They're watching. I'm like, where do you go next? Like run and hide. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I just kind of sat up straight in bed, just kind of shook my head and went, this has got to be a dream. This can't be real. But it's to your point, did you call law enforcement? And, in this particular night, they were standing there watching the looting going on.
Right. All right. That kind of frames the logistics now. We'll move into segment 3, where we can talk about some solutions. And that will be interesting. You are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by Jim Henry and Sal Freri. We ask you download and subscribe to this show and rate us on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Also follow us on our social media pages like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So solutions. I mean, I look at this, and again, my background is electronics and engineering and whatnot. I'm trying to apply some sort of, common sense to how do we get back to common sense, where we all share common sense, and I just look at this and I think, of two icons of the 60s that we could really use today. And, one is JFK, with his comment of, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And boy, is that ever far afield from what's going on today. And of course, Martin Luther King in his statement of people should be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And what would the two of them be saying, with what they see, going on today? I had thought up until this past year that the one thing that we shared as a country, whether we were politically, left-leaning, politically more right-leaning, but there was never really a question that we didn't all embrace the basic Bill of Rights, the foundation of what the country was built on, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. That is openly now targeted as being antiquated. It's 200 years old. We don't need that anymore. Well, if you throw that keel in the water away, then anything's game. And that is the objective of some facets of our society. It certainly was the tactic that the Bolsheviks used back in revolutionary Russia, in 1917. And, I used to say to myself when I was in high school back in the 60s, and we're learning history, European history, I said, how could a country as educated and advanced as Germany allow Hitler to come to power? And, as I understand, what actually happened there, he had difficulty getting a majority. So they went to the tactic, of basically attacking and eliminating contrary points of view to the point where, they eventually became the majority. And that scares me because it seems to me to relate to what we're seeing now with some of this cancel culture, where, I often, I don't politically, agree with everybody, but I love having conversations with people that have a different point of view, and exchanging ideas, because nobody's got all the answers, right? And that's been one of the great strengths of our democracy, has been the ability to have debate and to, and compromise. That's off the table now. It's just two polarized extremes. And the only solution is to get out of that, as I see it.
Yeah.
And what say you?
No,
it sound like Janine Pirro, right?
It's true. You can't, regardless of what side you on politically, if you're trying to have a conversation, there's no longer a debate. I love human behavior, and I love to watch human behavior and to make a career out of it. What winds up happening is, you watch two people argue, and they're both extremes. There's never a point that they can argue. What they come up with is they'll bring up a point, and you'll say, "Well, that's really stupid," and you'll come up with something, and then the other person comes back with. Instead of arguing that same point, they go off to something else, right? Because all they're doing is arguing in sound bites, and there's nothing is ever accomplished with it, But step number one always has to be: can you agree that there is a problem? If you can agree that there is a problem, then you will get to a solution. It may take a long time. It may take a lot of back and forth. But if you can't agree that a problem exists, you guaranteed you will never come up with a solution to that problem. Yeah, but to come to the solution, two people have to, it's like any negotiation deal, right? Two people, in a really successful negotiation, nobody wins, nobody loses, right? You both walk away with something. You don't get everything you want. You don't lose everything, right? You walk away with, with something. But the debates, the arguments that, the conversations that take place today, they're not even willing to understand that there is another side, let alone respect the other person's, position on it. It just doesn't exist. And they can't. And all they're doing is talking in sound bites. I'll tell you, for a solution, and I'll get crucified for this, but the way this breaks is you need a terrorist attack. You look at what happened in 9/11, right? Country was kind of, ripping apart a bit, and, there were all kinds of, arguments and debates and what have you. 9/11 solidified the country. Everybody got back to raising the flag. Everybody got to, realizing, the country is the country. It's our country, and you fight for your country. And the patriotism that it produced was incredible, right? We have gotten away from that. And I don't know, short of